Welcome to the podcast. I'm Keith Robinson. I'll be hosting our podcast today. And with me is one of our partnering consultants, Paul Zemsky. Let me tell you a little bit about who Focus Consulting is for those of you who don't know us. We've been in business now for 25 years and we were founded from the industry. So, all of us who work at Focus as consultants have had long industry careers prior to joining Focus. As a matter of fact, Paul joins us after retiring as the CIO for the Voya multi-asset team. Highest compliment he could pay us was he was a client and now he's a consultant. So, we're very thrilled to have Paul on our team because of his deep investment experience and deep investment knowledge. So, Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Keith.
In this episode, we're going to be spending some time talking about investor strategies for navigating challenging markets. So, how do we avoid some of the human traps that we invariably fall into when markets are a little bit choppy or challenging? And certainly the markets lately have been choppy and challenging. So, we're going to use Paul's wisdom and his guidance to help us understand how do we navigate through volatility. So what I thought I would do is I'd go out and use the old AI machine and ask it, so tell me about the top three events this year that you see that have impacted the markets. And sort of here's what it gave me. Trump. Well, like Madonna, you only need one word, right? Trump. And so that was the word it gave me. And it said, well, it really called it Washington policy. So the uncertainty of the policies that are going on in Washington right now, everything from tariffs to trade wars to actual wars, have been impacting the global economy. And certainly the US response to anything that's going on in the world can impact the markets short and longer term. So that was number one. Number two, breakthrough quantum computing. Now, I got to tell you, Paul, I paused a little bit and I went, okay, this is the AI machine promoting the AI machine. I get that. But a little bit of self promotion for AI. However, many feel that we are just scratching the surface of the power that quantum computing and AI can give us in the investment business. And it is creating fear. There's no doubt that it's creating fear. But certainly out of fear comes opportunity. And that's the idea of being able to identify that, put away the fear, and identify the opportunity. Now, the third one was inflation reacceleration. Inflation sentiment negatively impacting market sentiment, interest rate hikes by the central banks, slowdown in consumer spending, and the list goes on and on. The word sentiment is a thing that always gets my goat, Paul, because it's often more story than fact, right? A lot of this is more story than fact. But boy, these are traps for investors all the time. So, with this lovely news as our backdrop for our discussion, Paul, what's an investor to do? What about these events and others? Because I know you're still actively investing at least your own portfolio. What about these events and others create stress for investment professionals? And what are some things that they can do to overcome that stress?
Yeah, well, thanks, Keith. I would probably agree with one of three of those AI answers as drivers of near-term volatility in the market, and I think it's near-term unexpected volatility that causes investors the most angst, and for those without great philosophies and processes, causes them to make mistakes. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but. Clearly, Trump this year was a very big driver of volatility. Post-election, everyone expected it to be 2016 again. Markets will go up. There was very little risk, and we found that everybody was on the same side of the boat, which meant everyone was expecting bull markets. And lo and behold, we had Independence Day with the announcement of 45% tariffs, markets down 20 plus percent. And and that was very a key contributing factor. Clearly, worries about inflation and will inflation get to the level that the Fed needs to see to continue to ease rates. That was a big one, but that's also something. But that data has been coming in pretty well. Also difference between now and 2016 was interest rates are higher and equity markets aren't cheap. So when Trump came into office in 2016, valuations of the equity market by any measure were lower. Interest rates were basically zero. So it was really had a strong tailwind to equities, whereas now I think most people think, me, myself included, as a bit of a headwind. But the main driver of 2016 was, excuse me, 2025 was clearly Trump tariffs. And but fortunately, we did see backtracking and renegotiation, and markets are higher than they were, making record high. And I think, if someone were to say to you, "Hey, Keith, at the being in January, there's going to be a war between Iran and Israel, and the U.S. is going to bomb Iran. Where do you think the markets would be?" The answer would not have been at record highs.
Hmm.
Definitely a lot of surprises this year, but overall, markets have responded well to them.
Yeah, so Paul, just for our audience's sake, Paul is one of our CIOs that, as a client, I always refer to as the purple unicorn. And why would I refer to Paul that way? We have others like Paul, but they're very few and far between because they have high IQ and high EQ, emotional intelligence. So, Paul, as you think about unconventional approaches to managing fear and managing angst during periods of high market volatility and uncertainty, what are a few of the techniques that you would recommend to, for example, now your clients?
Well, sure. So first, uh, a shout out to focus. When I started in investing, I had the emotional intelligence or the EQ of a turnip. So I would say to everyone, it's something you can grow. But so as I went along my journey as an investor, I did recognize relatively, I guess, early on that I needed to work on my EQ as well. And that was not just for me, but as to how I led the team and what we did with the team. So that touched our investment process in so many ways. First and foremost was I really tried to develop a environment of psychological safety where all the investors on the team could speak up without any fear of any negative reprisals. And that really gets back to this idea that Focus talks about, which is the we is smarter than the me, and that a group of smart people working together with a common task, with a common goal, in this case to add alpha through asset allocation or manager selection, can do better than any one individual could on their own. And I really believe that. So then it was really about creating an environment where we can get all these great ideas from these people and create an environment where they felt safe bringing these forward. And not only that, but where they felt that they had the duty to candor. So we talk about candor and curiosity. We wanted people to always be curious, always be looking at the next idea, turning over every rock, really feeling that they were able to do that or bring that forward. But even more than that, create this idea that everybody had a responsibility. We talk about accountability, responsibility. Everybody had a responsibility around the team and a duty to the team to bring these ideas forward. So those were some of the unconventional things. And then also really demanded and required and only would hire and pick people who believed in the same thing. So it's not enough for me as the CIO to believe that. My four direct reports bought into this. As you know, Keith, we had you come in and work with us on this. So by the end of the day, we had a group of people who really wanted to operate in an environment of psychological safety where people could speak their minds, where people could bring ideas forward without any fear of reprisals, where people feel they had a duty to each other to own that type of behavior. And it ended up working out very well. And it worked out best during times of stress when markets were volatile, because when markets aren't volatile, it's easier. When markets are just going up, the term bull market genius applies. It's when markets are going really crazy that having that distinguishes the teams that are operating, the high performance teams from the lower performing teams.
Yeah, so a couple things. Boy, there's a lot in what you said there, Paul. Let's unpack it a little bit more.
Sure.
One of the concepts that we teach, for example, to create psychological safety is the ability in candor to separate fact from story. Can
Mm.
you say a few words about how you've utilized facts and stories to actually get a richer opportunity to invest in something that maybe people weren't interested in?
Yeah, so that was an exercise that we did work on, understanding the difference between a fact and a story and a reaction. So we talk about fact, story, reaction. And oftentimes as investors, and especially in volatile markets, the first thing we do is react. Then we create a story to talk about why the market's doing what it's doing, and the facts are left way off to the side. So so in our investment processes, we really try to focus in our investment discussions revolved around first bringing the facts to the table and then share those facts. So everyone specialized in certain facts. We like to think people were operating in their genius zone and try to identify where that was, which is a whole nother discussion. But we would have an asset allocation meeting once a week. We would first have people whose jobs were to bring facts about the economy, about markets, things like that to the table. And then everybody could have a different story about what those facts meant. And that's where the richness became was discussing those stories about what they thought was going to happen next based on the facts that we all agreed upon. And so having an environment where one, people recognize the difference between a fact, which is GDP growth or inflation or the price of gold, and then the story being what they thought that was all going to mean to the economy and the markets going forward, and then discussing those stories with rigorous debate, but respectfully. And then ultimately, we had a consensus process, which would fall back to a vote if we needed to, and we would reach consensus about what we would do next in the portfolios. And another key thing we learned, and this was a bit of EQ and just a bit of wisdom, was that we realized we didn't have to do anything. That not doing something was a decision. And when we looked at all the facts and told each of us told our stories, and we kind of came to our consensus discussion, sometimes not touching the portfolio was the best thing to do, particularly if the markets were very volatile, and especially if the volatility was caused by political risk, which is very hard to analyze.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful stuff. I guess one of the things that we've talked a little bit about was the culture of the team and hiring people that fit in that culture and that believe the same things that the rest of the team believes. And that
Yeah.
actually makes kind of that gives you an edge. I mean, my view is investment teams that are successful over time have that edge because they have the right team members in place. But there's also application of certain skills like curiosity. And you mentioned accountability, everybody feeling like they had responsibility for the investments. Can you talk about a couple of the key skills that you all used on your team, in your culture, that you feel gave you a particular investment edge?
I can't stress enough how the skill or the concept or the culture of psychological safety was an edge for us. Because as CIO, the risk is that people just repeat back what I want to hear or what I just said. And I don't have all the answers, and I really do believe that the we is smarter than the me. And I really wanted to create an environment where people can disagree with each other, including me, and that people recognize that I only had one vote. Now, eventually, if as CIO, I owned it and I could override, but that only happened like once in my career. But really wanted to create an environment where people would feel comfortable, respectfully contradicting each other and having different views and bringing those views forward. I remember a situation, and it's hard sometimes because we want people to agree with us. We're wired that way. And as boss, sometimes I just felt, well, why won't you just disagree with me? But I remember a situation where we talk about interest rates, and this one analyst came to the table, and he was very, very smart. He's still there, and very good view on interest rates. And he had a completely different view on rates than I did. I thought they're going up, going down. And he had facts, and he brought them to the table. And at the end of the discussion, I was like, gosh darn it, you're right. I hate it, but I love it that you're right, and you changed my mind, and great job. And so the point being that it's not just creating the psychological safety. It's about appreciation, and it's about, recognizing that as leaders, we want to be right, but also, that's not always going to lead to the best outcome. As a leader, our job is to find the best idea, not to have the best idea, but to find the best idea. And just, boy, going to the balcony and recognizing that that's my job every time I sat down at the table to have an investment discussion. It wasn't easy. I had an ego like everybody else, and I wanted to be right. But boy, we're all training ourselves to find the right answer and challenge each other. If we didn't feel we had the right answer, led to some great performance.
Yeah, I love that distinction. Find the right idea, not have the right idea, because ego gets in the way. Uh, and certainly investors that have experience and have been through a couple market cycles, the danger is the ego, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
thing that can take you down because you could say, well, yeah, but I was right in the last market cycle. Well, good for you, but all market cycles are different. And
Yes.
we might think they look the same, but they don't necessarily all act the same because the drivers of the cycle can be different, right? So I like what you said there about it's the job of the CIO or the senior PM to find the right answer, not have the right answer. You mentioned the balcony. So let's talk for a moment about going to the balcony because that's a strategy that is unique to human beings, but it's
Hmm.
also one that allows us to subjugate our ego as we try and find that right idea. Talk a little bit about how you use the balcony technique.
Yeah, so for me, the balcony means being able to step outside of myself and watch myself in real time, my emotions, my facial expressions, how I'm behaving, my body language. And that's all about the goal of creating the psychologically safe place and not entering into blame mode or entering getting below the line or so it's all about creating a place where people feel by looking at me that they're still safe. And let's go back to that instance where I was talking about the interest rate decision. And I was very cognizant of myself to not have a facial expression that was showing disagreement or to making sure I had open body language, like not sitting crossed like this, but to have my arms open and to lean in and be interested. And even though I was really angry at myself for being wrong and not having the right decision and think, boy, I should have had this answer. I was very cognizant because I was able to go to the balcony because I worked with you and others and my coach prior to train myself to how to do that, and everyone can do it. And to stay at the balcony and make sure that I was in an open place and in a curious place to receive the information, even though my ego told me that this guy was right and I was wrong.
Yeah, one thing you said there really landed, and I really want our audience to listen to this is you can learn these skills.
Absolutely.
Everybody can improve their EQ, their emotional intelligence, simply by paying attention. We actually have a teacher who teaches mindfulness. That's what he does. And mindfulness is all about exactly as you described, Paul. It's paying attention to yourself to go, am I projecting a way that creates safety? Or am I projecting in a way that creates fear? And I have to go to the balcony and literally step outside myself and watch myself, as we say, on the dance floor, right? That's the
Hmm.
analogy where the balcony or the dance floor, watch myself on that dance floor to go, no, actually, I'm managing myself well. And one of the leading indicators of that is this person continued to provide you with facts, stories, and conviction about this person's view on the interest rates.
Yes.
So, I mean, that in and of itself is how we manage not just volatile markets, but also team dynamics too, right? Um, I'm kind of curious. I know we're getting a little bit short on time here, but what have been the most significant lessons that you've learned so far when managing portfolios or teams through volatility?
I think the biggest lesson is to make sure your philosophy and process is sound before the volatility hits, right? So again, using these tools, developing trust among team members, creating a psychologically safe environment. One thing we didn't talk about was self-assessment and postmortems and going through those exercises to continuously learn as a team, learn where your strengths are and work on the weaknesses or the deltas as we call them, and go through that self-assessment process, which we would do on a quarterly basis. And that gets back to psychological safety because people coming forward with hey, I got this wrong. If you don't have a psychologically safe environment, that's not going to happen. And I really do believe you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your triumphs. So, having the right team, the right people, the right team, the trust, the psychological safety, the process, the philosophy, what you believe in, what you believe your edges in the market, and sticking to those things during the volatility and being able to at least have somebody on the team step out of themselves and alert the team if they're deviating from these things that have worked well for them in the past during the volatility. Because it's easy to get short-termism in a very volatile market, and that's not going to help investment results.
Yeah, boy, we see that all the time, right? Chasing losses. It's like a gambler chasing their losses at the tables, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a recipe for disaster. Every once in a blue moon, you get lucky, but most of the
Yeah.
time it goes the other way. It works against you. So, Paul, any final words of advice for managing murky markets? I know there's a lot here in everything that you've said, right? And we're just scratching the surface, but give me one final piece of advice that you would say, Keith, if you're managing an investment team, here's something that you really need to pay attention to.
I would say the best piece of advice I can give a CIO during murky markets, volatile markets, is use your team. Let your team help you. Let your team bring the ideas forward. They're there for a reason. You pick them, you believe in them, let them help you through it. It's not your job to be the stoic. It's okay to show vulnerability and say, guys, people, I need your help to get through this. Let's do it together.
Wise words indeed. And that is something that certainly we here at Focus believe that, the team is really what gives you the edge, how you construct it, how you manage it, how you lead it, and what you do with it when times are tough. So thank you, Paul, for your wisdom and counsel. And I'm sure that many people will reach out to you to say, well, help me with this. And that's part of what you do here at Focus is to help people get better at not just the technical side of investing, but the other piece, which is the people piece. And everybody says, well, this is a people business. And yet we don't spend enough time practicing the skills, and they are skills that you and I've been talking about today. So I appreciate you for your wisdom, your counsel, your experience, and for joining us here today. If this
Uh,
successful approach, intrigues you, please, by all means, visit our website, contact us directly. You certainly can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us through the website. Contact information also available here if you'd like to learn more. And we'd be happy to have a conversation with you about how do we navigate murky markets, and even more importantly, how do we navigate markets that are charging, because there are traps there as well. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you next time. We appreciate you joining us today.